The last light fades through dusty windows. Shelves stand empty, stripped of merchandise that once defined American life. The fluorescent fixtures, half of them dark, flicker over cracked linoleum floors. In the corner, a faded sign still promises satisfaction guaranteed or your money back. But there is no money left to return, no customers to satisfy. The parking lot outside, designed for thousands of cars, holds only scattered shopping carts pushed by wind across fading yellow lines. This is not a crime scene. This is not a natural disaster. This is the end of a promise that lasted over a century. A promise that said if you worked hard, if you built something real, if you served people well, success would follow. But promises break when greed enters the equation. And this store, this empty cathedral of commerce, is where one of America's greatest industrial empires came to die. The year is 1886. A railroad station agent in Minnesota is selling watches to fellow workers through a mail-order system. His name is Richard Warren Sears, and he has discovered something profound. In an America connected by rail but divided by distance, people in small towns and rural areas have money but nowhere to spend it. The general stores in their communities carry limited inventory at inflated prices. There is no competition, no choice, no alternative. Sears realizes that if he can offer variety and value through the mail, he can reach customers that traditional retailers ignore. He partners with Alva Roebuck, a watchmaker, and together they begin building what will become the most trusted name in American retail. If you're intrigued by how one of America's most dominant companies could collapse so completely and want to understand what really happened behind the scenes, make sure to like this video and subscribe. Drop a comment with your own memories of Sears or thoughts on corporate greed. The Sears catalog arrives in homes like magic. Hundreds of pages, thousands of items. Everything from clothes to tools to entire houses sold in kit form and delivered by rail. For families living in isolation, the catalog is more than commerce. It is connection to the wider world. It is proof that modern life exists beyond their horizons. It is hope in printed form. The company grows exponentially. By 1895, the catalog has grown to 532 pages. By 1908, it exceeds 1,000 pages. Sears is not just selling products, it is defining what products Americans want to buy. Richard Sears understands psychology. He writes the catalog copy himself, using language that builds trust and intimacy. He offers money-back guarantees when most retailers operate on buyer beware principles. He prices items affordably, taking lower margins in exchange for volume. He is building something more valuable than short-term profit. He is building loyalty. Families who buy from Sears once return again and again. They trust the name. They believe the promises. And for decades, those promises are kept. The company opens its first retail store in 1925. This is a calculated risk. The catalog business is thriving. But America is changing. Cars are becoming common. Roads are improving. People can travel to shop. Sears decides to meet them where they are. The stores are massive. They carry thousands of items. They are designed to recreate the catalog experience in physical form. The breadth of selection, the competitive pricing, the guarantee of satisfaction. And it works. The stores succeed beyond expectation. Sears becomes a destination, a place where working-class families can afford quality goods, where a single shopping trip can fulfill all their needs. By the 1950s, Sears is the largest retailer in America. It employs hundreds of thousands of people. It operates stores in every state. It has diversified into insurance, banking, credit cards. The Sears credit card is often the first credit card a working-class American receives. It represents financial inclusion, the ability to buy today and pay tomorrow. Sears is not just a store. It is an institution woven into the fabric of American life. Generations grow up with Sears. They buy their first tools there, their appliances, their children's clothes. The company becomes synonymous with reliability, value, and middle-class aspiration. The catalog grows to over 1,500 pages. It is printed twice per year and mailed to millions of homes. Children pore over it, marking items they hope to receive for Christmas or birthdays. Adults plan purchases months in advance, budgeting for big-ticket items like refrigerators or lawnmowers. The catalog is not just advertising, it is entertainment. It is a window into possibility, and Sears understands this. The company invests in the catalog even when the direct return is hard to measure because it understands that brand presence matters. That being part of people's lives creates value that transcends individual transactions. The stores themselves become anchors of American shopping malls. When developers build new malls in the 1960s and 1970s, they compete to attract Sears as a tenant. Having Sears ensures foot traffic. It signals legitimacy. The company leverages this power to negotiate favorable lease terms. It often owns the land beneath its stores or secures long-term leases at below-market rates. This real estate portfolio will later become critical to the company's story, but in ways no one at the time imagines. Inside the stores, Sears develops private label brands that become household names. Kenmore appliances, Craftsman tools, DieHard batteries. These brands are not just cheaper alternatives to name brands. They are often equal or superior in quality. Sears controls the entire supply chain, from manufacturing to distribution to retail. This vertical integration allows for quality control and cost efficiency. A Craftsman wrench comes with a lifetime guarantee. If it breaks, you bring it back and get a new one, no questions asked. This is not a gimmick. This is a company standing behind its products in a way that builds generational trust. The employees at Sears are treated with relative respect for the era. The company offers benefits, pensions, and opportunities for advancement. Working at Sears is a career, not just a job. Managers often start on the sales floor and rise through the ranks. There's loyalty in both directions. Employees stay for decades because the company takes care of them. Customers return because the employees know them by name, understand their needs, and genuinely care about helping them find the right product. This human element of retail, the relationship between customer and salesperson, is something Sears does well for generations. But by the 1980s, the landscape is shifting. A new kind of retailer is emerging. Walmart, Kmart, Target. These competitors operate on a different model. They focus on price above all else. They locate in cheaper real estate outside city centers. They invest heavily in logistics and supply chain efficiency. They are not trying to be everything to everyone like Sears. They are trying to be the cheapest option for everyday items, and it works. Consumers, especially as economic pressures increase, begin to prioritize price over service, over brand loyalty, over the relationship they have with a store. Sears initially dismisses these competitors. The leadership believes the company's brand strength and product quality will insulate it from price competition. They believe customers will pay slightly more for the Sears guarantee, for the service, for the trust built over a century. And, for a time, they are partially right. Sears remains profitable through the 1980s, but market share is eroding, slowly at first, then with increasing speed. The catalog, once the company's greatest asset, becomes a liability. It is expensive to produce and mail. The response rates are declining as consumers have more shopping options. In 1993, Sears makes a decision that feels pragmatic at the time, but will later seem symbolic. It discontinues the catalog after 107 years. The very foundation of the company, the innovation that made it great, is abandoned. The 1990s bring further challenges. The rise of category killers. Home Depot and Lowe's take the hardware and tool business. Best Buy takes electronics. Specialty retailers target every segment where Sears once dominated. The department store model, where one store sells everything, is losing to focused retailers who can offer deeper selection in specific categories. Sears tries to compete by reducing costs, closing underperforming stores, cutting staff. But these are defensive moves. There is no vision for what Sears should become in this new retail environment. The company is managing decline rather than pursuing transformation. Leadership becomes a revolving door. CEOs come and go, each with a new strategy that is abandoned when they leave. There is no continuity, no long-term thinking. The focus shifts increasingly to short-term financial performance, quarterly earnings, stock price, Wall Street approval. The values that built Sears, The focus on customers and employees and long-term relationships are slowly eroded in favor of financial metrics that satisfy investors but do not build sustainable business. By 2004, Sears is struggling but still significant. It operates over 800 department stores. It has revenue of nearly $40 billion. It is profitable, though margins are thin and declining. The company needs reinvestment. The stores need renovation. The business model needs rethinking. What it needs is leadership willing to sacrifice short-term profits for long-term health. What it gets instead is a hedge fund manager who sees opportunity in the real estate value of the company's property portfolio. His name is Edward Lampert. In 2005, he orchestrates a merger between Sears and Kmart, another struggling retailer he had previously acquired out of bankruptcy. Lampert positions this as a bold move that will create synergies and compete more effectively against Walmart. The combined company will have over 3,500 stores and revenue exceeding $55 billion. On paper, it creates the third largest retailer in America. But paper does not capture reality. And the reality is that Lampert has no interest in retail. He is interested in financial engineering. Lampert's background is in finance, not retail. He made his fortune through hedge fund investments, finding undervalued assets and extracting value through restructuring, asset sales, and financial manipulation. He looks at Sears and sees valuable real estate occupied by an underperforming retail business. The stores sit on land that was acquired decades ago at low cost. That land is now worth billions. Lampert's vision is not to fix the retail business. It is to monetize the assets while minimizing investment in the operations that generate revenue. The merger itself is structured to benefit Lampert's hedge fund, ESL Investments. He becomes chairman and CEO of the combined company. He maintains control while other shareholders bear the risk, and immediately the financial games begin. Instead of investing in store renovations or employee training or marketing, capital is diverted. The company begins selling its best real estate and leasing it back. This creates immediate cash that can be paid out to shareholders or used to pay down debt, but it increases long-term operating costs. The company is literally selling its foundation to maintain appearances of financial health. The stores deteriorate visibly. Anyone who shopped at Sears in the late 2000s and early 2010s saw the decline. Burned-out lights that were not replaced. Merchandise in disarray. Inventory that seemed random and insufficient. Broken fixtures. Dirty bathrooms. Staff reduced to skeleton crews who could not provide service even if they wanted to. The Sears shopping experience, once a hallmark of American retail, became depressing. Customers stopped coming not because they no longer needed the products Sears sold, but because shopping there had become unpleasant. Lampert's management philosophy makes the situation worse. He runs the company from his hedge fund offices in Florida. He rarely visits stores. He communicates with executives through email and video conference, maintaining physical and psychological distance from the business. He implements a theory he calls radical decentralization, dividing Sears into over 30 separate business units that are forced to compete against each other for resources. The idea, borrowed from Ayn Rand's objectivist philosophy that Lampert admires, is that internal competition will drive efficiency and innovation. The reality is chaos. The business units hoard resources and information. They refuse to cooperate. Departments that should work together become adversaries. The appliance division competes with the home improvement division for shelf space and marketing budget. No one is optimizing for the customer experience or the overall health of the company. Everyone is fighting for their unit's survival. In an artificially competitive internal environment, morale collapses. Talented managers leave. Those who remain are demoralized. The employees suffer first and most directly. Lampert cuts costs relentlessly. Wages are frozen or reduced. Benefits are slashed. The pension plan, which had promised security to generations of workers, is underfunded as the company diverts cash elsewhere. Staff levels drop to dangerous lows. A store that once employed 50 people now operates with 15. Those 15 are expected to maintain the same standards, provide the same service, cover the same floor space. Impossible. They try. They care about the customers they have served for years, but they are set up to fail. The impact ripples outward. Suppliers who have done business with Sears for decades are squeezed. Payment terms are extended. Orders are reduced. The relationships that made Sears a reliable partner dissolve into purely transactional interactions governed by whoever offers the lowest price. Quality suffers. The products on Sears shelves become increasingly generic, indistinguishable from what is available elsewhere. The private label brands that once signaled value and quality are cheapened. Craftsman tools are made with inferior materials. Kenmore appliances are rebranded products from the lowest bidder. The brand equity built over a century is strip-mined for short-term cash extraction. Store closures accelerate. Lampert frames each closure as a necessary adjustment to market conditions. But the pattern is clear. The company is shrinking, not adapting. Each closure eliminates jobs, severs community connections, and reduces the company's relevance. Malls that had anchored themselves around Sears are devastated when the stores close. The empty spaces are too large for most retailers to occupy. They sit vacant, accelerating the decline of the malls themselves. Entire communities lose a retail institution that had served them for generations. The financial maneuvers become more aggressive. In 2015, Lampert arranges for Sears to sell its most valuable remaining brand, Craftsman, to Stanley Black & Decker for $900 million. This is a company selling its heritage for cash. Craftsman was not just a product line. It was the symbol of Sears' commitment to quality and value. Men who bought their first Craftsman toolbox in the 1950s still owned it 60 years later. The brand represented durability, reliability, integrity. And it is sold to raise cash to keep a dying company on life support for a few more quarters. Lampert uses the cash to buy time, but not to fix the underlying problems. There is no investment in e-commerce infrastructure, even as Amazon is transforming retail. There is no store renovation, no meaningful marketing, no product innovation. The company is in managed decline, and the manager is extracting maximum value during the descent. In 2017, Sears sells the Kenmore brand licensing rights. In 2018, it sells the DieHard battery brand. The company is cannibalizing itself, selling the parts that have value while the retail operations continue to hemorrhage. The employees still showing up to work are witnessing the dismantling of their lives. Many have spent their entire careers at Sears. They believed in the company. They planned their retirements around the pension they were promised. Now they work in stores that are falling apart, selling products no one wants to customers who come mainly out of nostalgia or because there are no other options nearby. The psychological toll is immense. These are not abstract financial transactions. They are human lives disrupted by decisions made in hedge fund offices by people who have never walked a sales floor or helped a customer choose a washing machine. By 2018, the situation is terminal. The company is losing money at rates that cannot be sustained even with asset sales. Vendors are refusing to ship merchandise without cash payment up front because they do not trust Sears to pay its bills. The stores entering the holiday season have empty shelves because inventory cannot be purchased. In October 2018, Sears Holdings Corporation files for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. Over a century of history of trust of American retail ends not with adaptation or evolution, but with financial collapse engineered by greed. The bankruptcy process is revealing. Lampert's hedge fund, ESL Investments, is both the largest creditor and the largest shareholder. This creates inherent conflicts of interest. Lampert proposes to buy Sears out of bankruptcy through his hedge fund. He offers to acquire the remaining assets for a fraction of their value. Other bidders are discouraged or blocked. In February 2019, a bankruptcy judge approves Lampert's bid. He acquires the remaining Sears and Kmart stores, about 400 of them, for roughly $5 billion in cash, and assumed liabilities. This is a company that had been worth over $30 billion at the time of the Kmart merger. What Lampert purchased was a shell. The real estate had been sold. The valuable brands had been stripped. What remained were deteriorating stores in declining malls with inventory nobody wanted. He promised to revitalize the company, to invest in e-commerce to make Sears relevant again. But the closures continued. By 2020, fewer than 200 stores remained. By 2022, that number had dropped below 30. The company that once operated over 4,000 stores across America had been reduced to a handful of locations, surviving through inertia and nostalgia. The human cost of this collapse is staggering. Over 100,000 employees lost their jobs during the bankruptcy and subsequent closures. Many were older workers who had spent decades with the company and had limited prospects for finding comparable employment elsewhere. The pension plan was underfunded by over $1 billion. Retirees saw their benefits reduced. Promises made when they were young workers starting careers were broken when they needed them most. This is not a market force. This is not creative destruction. This is the deliberate extraction of value by someone who saw opportunity in failure. If you're still watching and want to understand how we can prevent this kind of corporate destruction in the future, hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. Like this video if you believe accountability matters, and share your thoughts in the comments about whether executives like Lampert should face consequences for destroying American institutions. The question that haunts the Sears story is whether this outcome was inevitable. Could different leadership have saved the company? The answer is almost certainly yes. Retail was changing, but companies that invested in adaptation survived and even thrived. Target reinvented itself. Best Buy, which faced an existential threat from Amazon, transformed its business model and survived. Walmart, despite its size, continuously innovated in logistics and e-commerce. These companies faced the same market forces as Sears. The difference was leadership that saw their role as building for the future rather than extracting value in the present. Sears had advantages that these competitors lacked. It had over a century of brand equity. It had customer loyalty that spanned generations. It had a real estate portfolio worth billions. It had private label brands that customers trusted. It had existing relationships with suppliers and manufacturers. These assets, if leveraged properly, could have formed the foundation for transformation. An early investment in e-commerce could have made Sears a credible Amazon competitor. The stores could have been reimagined as showrooms and distribution hubs. The Craftsman brand could have been expanded rather than sold. The possibilities existed. What was missing was leadership willing to sacrifice short-term financial extraction for long-term business health. Lampert's defenders argue he was trying to save a dying company and that the retail apocalypse made Sears's collapse inevitable. This argument ignores the timeline and the evidence. Sears was struggling in 2005 when Lampert took control, but it was not dying. It had revenue of $40 billion. It was profitable. It had assets that could have funded the transformation. Lampert had 15 years and access to billions in capital through asset sales and financing. He could have invested in the business. He chose instead to extract value while the company deteriorated. The financial records tell the story. During Lampert's tenure, Sears paid out billions to shareholders through dividends and stock buybacks while starving the retail operations of investment. The company borrowed against its real estate and then sold that real estate to raise cash that was distributed to investors rather than reinvested in the business. This is a textbook case of asset stripping. Taking a company with valuable assets, extracting those assets, and leaving a hollow shell that eventually collapses. Lampert personally benefited enormously from this process. His hedge fund received preferential treatment in the bankruptcy. He acquired the remaining Sears assets at bargain prices. He owned the real estate that Sears leased and collected rent from the company he controlled. He structured transactions that benefited ESL investments at the expense of other stakeholders. The employees, the vendors, the communities that depended on Sears, they were left with nothing. Lampert and his investors extracted billions. The legal system provided limited accountability. Creditors sued, alleging that Lampert had orchestrated a fraudulent transfer of assets. The lawsuits claimed he used his control of Sears to benefit his hedge fund at the expense of the company and its creditors. In 2021, a settlement was reached. Lampert agreed to pay a fraction of what was demanded, without admitting wrongdoing. He faced no criminal charges, no regulatory sanctions. The system that should protect companies and stakeholders from predatory financial engineering failed. The broader implications of the Sears collapse extend beyond one company. It represents a shift in American capitalism. For most of the 20th century, large corporations operated with an implicit social contract. They provided employment, supported communities, and took seriously their role as institutions that served multiple stakeholders. Shareholders were important, but so were employees, customers, and society. This stakeholder capitalism was not altruism. It was enlightened self-interest. Companies that treated people well built loyalty that translated into long-term success. The rise of shareholder primacy and financial engineering changed this. Beginning in the 1980s and accelerating through the 1990s and 2000s, the ideology that corporations exist solely to maximize shareholder value became dominant. Hedge funds and private equity firms bought companies not to build them, but to extract value. Employees became costs to be minimized rather than assets to be developed. Long-term thinking was sacrificed for quarterly earnings. The story of Sears is the story of this transformation taken to its logical extreme. The empty stores that remain stand as monuments to this transformation. In abandoned malls across America, the Sears logo still hangs above vacant spaces. The fixtures are gone. The merchandise is gone. The employees are gone. What remains is absence, the absence of a company that once meant something, the absence of jobs that supported families, the absence of a vision for capitalism that included responsibility and stewardship. These empty spaces are not just failed retail, they are failed promises. The communities that lost their Sears stores lost more than shopping options. They lost gathering places. They lost institutions that had been constants through generations of change. A small town that had relied on Sears for everything from appliances to automotive services suddenly had to find alternatives that often did not exist locally. The economic impact rippled outward. Other stores in the same malls closed. Jobs disappeared. Tax revenue declined. The social fabric frayed. For the employees, the betrayal was personal. They had given their working lives to a company that promised security and was supposed to take care of them. They had believed in the mission, in the brand, in the idea that honest work would be rewarded. The pension cuts hit hardest. These were not distant abstractions. These were people in their 70s watching their monthly checks decrease because executives had prioritized dividends over pension funding. The cruelty was not in the market changing. The cruelty was in the deliberate decision to prioritize financial extraction over human welfare. The Sears story offers lessons that extend beyond retail. It shows that no institution, no matter how powerful or established, is immune to destruction by greed. It shows that financial engineering can destroy in years what took generations to build. It shows that when executives prioritize personal enrichment over institutional health, the damage extends far beyond balance sheets. It shows that the systems meant to protect stakeholders, the boards of directors, the regulators, the legal structures, can be captured and rendered ineffective by those they are meant to constrain. There is a photograph from 2018 taken in the final days before a Sears store closed. An elderly employee stands in the empty store, looking at the bare shelves. She had worked there for 43 years, started as a cashier, became a department manager, planned to retire with her pension. The store closing meant she lost her job 18 months before retirement eligibility. The underfunded pension meant her benefits would be reduced. In her face is not just sadness, but confusion, betrayal, the incomprehension that comes from watching something you believed in prove unworthy of that belief. That photograph captures something essential about the Sears collapse. This was not creative destruction. This was not the inevitable evolution of markets. This was a deliberate choice by people in positions of power to prioritize their own enrichment over the lives and livelihoods of thousands of workers and millions of customers. It was greed, given corporate form and legal protection, destroying value in the pursuit of extraction. The final irony is that Lampert's financial engineering ultimately failed even on its own terms. The asset stripping did not create a sustainable business. The real estate sales did not generate long-term value for shareholders. The company he controlled went bankrupt. The stores he acquired out of bankruptcy continued to close. The brands he sold are now owned by competitors. What was supposed to be brilliant financial strategy was revealed as simple looting, taking everything valuable while it was still attached and leaving nothing but debt and empty buildings. Today, Sears exists in name only. A handful of stores operate, but they are ghosts. The brand means nothing to younger consumers. The trust built over a century was squandered in 15 years. The name that once symbolized reliability and value now symbolizes failure and betrayal. This transformation did not have to happen. Different choices would have produced different outcomes. Those choices would have required leadership that valued the institution more than personal gain, that valued employees more than quarterly dividends, that understood stewardship as a responsibility rather than an obstacle to extraction. The empty malls where Sears once anchored community retail are slowly being repurposed. Some become apartments. Some become medical centers. Some are demolished. The physical spaces find new uses. But what cannot be recovered is the social institution, the place where generations of Americans bought their first tools, their first appliances, their children's school clothes, the place where employees built careers and communities formed around shared commercial experience. That is gone. Not because it had to end, but because people with power chose to destroy it for profit. And so we return to where we began. The empty store. The dusty windows. The faded promise of satisfaction guaranteed. The parking lot where families once gathered to shop now holds only wind and weeds. This is how a century of trust ends. Not with dignity, not with honor, not with the recognition that something valuable is being lost, but with balance sheets and bankruptcy filings and hedge fund managers counting their profits while former employees count their losses. The story of Sears is a warning about what happens when financial engineering replaces business leadership, about what happens when short-term extraction replaces long-term stewardship, about what happens when greed is given control over institutions that took generations to build. The warning has not been heeded. Across America, private equity and hedge funds continue to acquire companies, strip their assets, load them with debt, and profit from their destruction. The pattern repeats. Different names, different industries, same story. The light fades completely now. The store is dark. The doors are locked. The sign still hangs, but it means nothing. Sears is dead. Killed not by Amazon, not by Walmart, not by the internet or changing consumer preferences. Killed by greed, by the decision that extracting value today mattered more than building value for tomorrow. That is the lesson. That is the warning. That is the haunting truth that lingers long after the last light goes dark.